outside of where I was rooted, like union organizing, I also needed political home to be best like build or learn from other folks like much smarter or more experienced organizers than me, and being in like community or like being in the same space with them, I thought was found to be a very transformative experience as well, like participating in an organization. Yeah, so I've been co-chair of that org for about the last year or so, which has also been, you know, a very big experience of its own. That's where most of my organizing is right now. Well, I'll talk more about that later. I'll pass it over to Allie now.
Hi everyone. My name is Allie. My pronouns are she, her. I am I'm the co-chair of the abolitionist working group of the Madison area DSA, as well as a member of the Tempest Collective. And so I guess to frame a lot of what I'm gonna say, maybe a little bit of background on how I got here. It's a little bit different. Thank a teacher, I guess. When I was 14, my high school history teacher assigned me to read about Emma Goldman. And if you haven't read any Emma Goldman, highly recommend. And especially let your 14-year-olds read it if you want them to become anarchists. So yeah, to frame this and kind of move it into like now and what we're kind of talking about. Yeah, I'm an anarchist and an abolitionist. So my theory of change is very inextricably embedded in that. And so like to me, the way we move forward is kind of outside of electoralism and these various apparatuses of the state. Because to me, like I've been in DSA leadership, I've been, you know, with the abolitionist working group for a long time. You know, at the end of the day, all we have is one another. And so we need to kind of commit to caring for one another and build community outside of these precarious institutions and these precarious state-sanctioned protections. Because we've seen how precarious a lot of these like rights are and how unmotivated the Democrats are to codify them. So for me, a lot of my politics is based on that struggle from below, building community, doing the work in our community that materially improves the lives of the people around us. And that is, you know, this is not the first time a lot of us have organized under a you know, right-wing presidency. A lot of us have also previously organized under a Trump presidency, right? And it's important to have a clarity of focus in this organizing. And so, as I said, my politic is really, you know, rooted in the fact that there are a lot of these structures in our society that are not reformable or salvageable. And instead of like, you know, just trying to reform them, we build something new, rooted in care for one another and a radical empathy for those in our community. Even maybe those people in our community we don't really like, that we're not friends with, right? Rooted in that radical care and a firm belief that no one is disposable. And so like moving forward, a lot of what I'm gonna talk about today is that struggle from below and building something together in a way that is from the ground up. And it is a little hard and it is challenging because it does involve really connecting with the people around us, but it is so much more worth it because that is how we build a mass movement. That is how we bring people to the left, right? By connecting with them, by materially improving their conditions, by providing a real clear alternative to both neoliberalism as well as right-wing populism. And I think I'll end there for now.
Hey y'all, I think it's today. Can you hear me well enough? I've been told I'm a soft speaker sometimes, so I just want to make sure that comes through. I'm at-large officer for Milwaukee DSA, so I just drove over earlier today from our general meeting where we had some kind of record turnout, especially for like an off kind of convention meeting. A lot of folks showing out, interested in you know, in the better world that we're trying to build, and trying out just like what to say with Tommy over here in the car with me, and thinking on election night we had this big election night watch party, and we had a whole bunch of folks over from a range of ages, and kind of realizing for the first time that folks who are like a freshman in college, sophomore in college, some folks in the crowd maybe right now were in middle school in the first Trump presidency, and that kind of rocked me, that like growing up through this first like eruption of fascism into society again, and that there was this huge wave, right, of energy and hope and optimism that maybe if we all take to the streets in millions, we're going to be able to disrupt the system. And there's a whole lot of lessons to be learned from that era, a whole lot of mistakes that liberals may have made, a whole lot of mistakes that we have made, and hopefully lessons that we've learned along the way. But from talking to folks this week, I think felt like a sense of resolve. There was day one kind of despair, but from what I'm seeing in folks is a sense of like a full recognition that fascism and the fascist movement is rising up in our nation, and we have to take care of it some way, somehow. And so we have to get smarter. We have to take our organizing really seriously. Our society has not been made to have real community, like we've talked about, right? It's been disrupted. There's a great book called Bowling Alone that talks about how just everything in our society has been disrupted, from the need to have a car to go to the grocery store to get to hang out with your friends, whatever. Our society isn't structurally made to have community, and that I think plays a lot into the fascist rise that we've seen, but more so in how we deal with this problem is getting intentional about the community building, about how we're doing our labor organizing. Talking to Halsey earlier about like making spreadsheets of our relationships, right? We have to. If our society isn't built to do what we need it to do, we have to be the people who are rebuilding those connections. We have to do it really intentionally. A lot of active effort. We have to do it democratically, and I've just seen that, I don't know, I've seen in DSA this, I think, reawakening of democratic movement that hasn't really existed in our society in decades, and it's been a lot of growing pains, but I also have a lot of hope in that we've shown that this is in some sense what works. And now we have to these next 4 years or sooner than that, go all out with what we got. And so that's just my rough thoughts at what's happened here.
Hi everyone, I'm Adrienne. I use she, her pronouns. I'm academic staff here at UW-Madison, so I am a member of UFAS, but when I was a graduate student here, also I just couldn't leave, I was also a member of the TAA, and so I was actively involved in the Wisconsin uprising and the occupation in response to Governor Scott Walker's Act 10, otherwise known as the Budget Repair Bill, and the decimation of public sector unions and the public sector generally here in Wisconsin in 2010 and 2011. A little bit of my background, I'm from a working class family, so I always was keenly aware of what I didn't have and how I didn't measure up. In Denver, Colorado, and it wasn't until I went to college that I actually got the language to describe what I knew in my body wasn't right, and that was when I took a Marxism seminar with my senior year of college with a really great scholar named Vivek Chibber, and it was at that point that I was able to articulate what I saw and what I felt, and the rage that I experienced on behalf of people like me, and people not like me, but like having a language to talk about that. So, I was in New York when we entered, when the Iraq War happened. So some of the first elements of activism that I got to participate in was that anti-war demonstration. Or when I was studying abroad in Argentina, that was the time in 2001. I am very old, everybody. I might be the oldest person in this room. You know, Argentina was going through a debt crisis and was about to unpeg the dollar from the peso. So I got to witness and participate anti-imperialist protests in the streets of Argentina. That was really, really formative as well. So I came to graduate school in part to study class analysis here with a scholar who has now since passed away, Eric Wright. And that's when I joined the TAA. Again, from a working class family, my distinct memory as a child was pulling up to a Safeway, which is a grocery store in Colorado, or maybe it was King Soopers actually. It doesn't really matter. The point is that we pulled up, I was 4 or 5 sitting in the front seat, and my mother popped our Dodge Colt so fast in reverse, I like nearly spun my own head around, and I looked over in alarm at her, and she says, "We don't cross a picket line." And so she drove us across the street to, of course, the other grocery store, because there was one right next door. But the point is that was a really formative experience for me, so I knew that my mother was kind of apolitical, that unions were a good thing, and they are. Participating in the occupation was really, really powerful. Being able to bargain with the state when we still had a contract was really, really powerful. So understanding what that looks like up front. I left graduate school, had a number of jobs, worked as a labor organizer, helped organize workers in Chicago, and now I am at the Havens Right Center for Social Justice here at UW. I don't know that I have much more to say at this point, but I'm really just so happy to be here. Thanks.
Hey everybody, my name is Bianca Gomez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with Freedom Inc. and Freedom Action Now here in Madison, Wisconsin. I've been here organizing for about 10 years now in the local Madison community. So Freedom Inc. works with Black and Southeast Asian women and queer folks who are low to no income. We're a queer feminist organization, and we pride ourselves on doing radical direct services and meeting the material needs of our people, doing political education and organizing on things that matter to our people and our community. I also support the Free the 350 Bail Fund. We're an abolitionist organization that seeks to undermine the Dane County Jail and the criminal justice system. And we bail out Black folks who are not wrongfully incarcerated, who are just incarcerated in the Dane County Jail. So I've been working with the Bail Fund for a few years also. And in this moment, of course, as a Black woman, I'm very disappointed in America, but I'm not surprised, right? America's been American since the beginning of time. And the thing that I think gives me a little bit of hope isn't the word, but I can't think of a better one right now, is that my people have actually survived much worse, right? We've survived slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration. We survived all of these things, and we know that this is a manifestation of those things or a perpetuation of those things. But I truly believe that my people can and will survive if we lean into the things that we've been leaning into for the last 400 years that kept our community strong and stable, and relying on each other instead of relying on state resources who have never provided our communities with the things that we needed to survive in the first place. We've gotten crumbs, we've gotten a little bit of this, a little bit of there. We've gotten policies with no backbones, but we've never had the resources that we need to survive. We've never had, people talk about divestments in education under 2025, divestments in healthcare under 2025. And yeah, I'm nervous about that, right? Especially as somebody who has just regular everyday medical insurance and I went to college for education, and I went to UW for grad school and got my master's in Afro-American Studies here at UW. But in terms of divestment, because of 2025 or destruction because of 2025. My people never had those things to begin with. We've always had to make our own way. We've always had to rely on each other and rely on the crumbs that we received. So I'm not really worried about divestment. I'm not really worried about the destruction in the same way that white liberal America might be worried. And I think that's really important for you all to know, right? And for you all to know where our community started, is where are we about to end up, right? With nothing, because that's how we've been forced to exist in America. And just because we see an individual black person or a small group of black people making $100,000, whatever the middle class income is nowadays, the majority of our people have always lived in poverty. The majority of our people have always been in cages or have had an experience, a communal experience with the state. In state violence in the criminal justice system, the majority of our community has not been able to survive with the resources that they need. So, right, that doesn't mean that I don't have fear. That doesn't mean that I don't have concerns. That doesn't mean I'm happy about a Trump presidency, right? We know that we're about to be in a period of suffering, and I lean into, we've been here before, and not everybody made it out, to be clear, right? Some of our people did not make it out alive, but we've been here before, and we know what we need to do to win. We need rebellion, we need organizing, we need uprisings, right? We need mutual aid, we need communal support, we need our mamas and our grandmas to support like we know all of the things that we already have a blueprint, is what I'm saying. And I encourage other people to lean into that as well. Like, we've been here before, we've survived this before, and we can survive it as long as we kind of, I really think the solution is detaching from capitalism, which is more difficult than we like to admit in our movement spaces. Even spaces like this, right? None of us are living scrappy with the bare minimum during this time, right? But letting go of materialism and letting go of capitalism, again, very hard to do when we become accustomed to things, but I think that is an important milestone, going to be an important tenet of how we defeat Trumpism and fascism, because they're leaning into, tax incentives, which we know we ain't about to get that anyway, but they're leaning into things that working class people need, and when we let go of that, one, they're not gonna do it, and two, they're gonna half-ass it, and we ain't gonna be included. Well, I'm not gonna be included in that anyway. I think we will be able to detach from that and really lean into communal support, mutual aid, and get down with the people who are most impacted by what's going on.
My name is Tommy Mulcairns. I'm the UW-Milwaukee YDSA co-chair. I don't have anywhere near as much experience as anyone else in this panel, so I don't have anything brilliant to say to pull on, but I think in analyzing how we got here with the Trump presidency, right, like I think Trump put himself forward as a far-right fascist figure and was still chosen. And I think what that shows us is that people are hurting and they are in pain. And I think the Democrats failed to put forward any real vision, right? And I think there are a lot of people now, like Autumn was saying, we had a ton of people show up to our meeting. I think a lot of people now are disillusioned with the Democratic Party, those who haven't fallen into fascism. But I think if we don't counter a fascist narrative by presenting a positive vision for the future, I think that we risk ceding what is happening to fascism. So the job of the left now is to put forward a positive vision. And I think what that means is showing people that when you engage in mass movement organizing, you can win real change, right? Like we did the encampment on our campus, UW-Milwaukee, and we were able to actually win a pretty good deal. I mean, we didn't get everything that we wanted. We were able to make change. So I think that showing people that change comes through actually working together and struggling together in a mass movement, and showing them they can make change through that is the way that the left needs to go.
Right. Thank you.
I think you just answered all of our questions, so we can all go home.
And I also want to say you do have a lot to contribute, because I think a lot of people here are undergrads. You're an undergrad organizer, and we are kind of thinking about how to align our undergrad student movements. I'm a grad student, I'm old, but with all of the movements across the university and the city. So that is super important perspective. And I think you kind of took us right to the first question that I wanted to pose to everyone. And I think it's really the question in light of all of the conversations we've had today. People talked about it already on this panel, about how we didn't just end up here on Tuesday, right? This has been a long process. People in this country, the working class, Black and brown people especially, have been fighting against capitalism, fighting against oppression and exploitation under worse conditions than we're facing today, but often with stronger left movements than we have today. So I wanted to pose the question to all of you in light of that, in light of the reminders that we have that this is a long, long struggle, to actually think about how we did get here, and not just the analysis of how Trump got here, but how we as the left maybe need to reflect on what we've been doing. So I hope that sort of makes sense. So maybe rephrase that. So how did we get here as a country, but also what does that say about our left movements? And I will hand it to whoever wants to talk. It looks like Adrian is nodding.
Okay, this is the one that I'm really fired up about. Okay, so as Holly just reframed, like it's actually two questions, right? How did we get here as a nation, and how did we get here as a polity, and how did we get here as the left? So the former question to me is actually overdetermined, which means that there are way too many factors, and I know that we're all like, or maybe some of you, or maybe the US media really wants like a smoking gun, like the silver bullet to say, oh, it was this one thing, it was misogyny, it was racism, it was both misogyny and racism, it was the economy, stupid, it was the fact that the Dems didn't offer any sort of platform that appeals to working people, but the Republicans offered a rhetorical platform that made those suggestions, so on and so forth, and it's huge. It's there. I mean, let's be honest. There's a massive, I think a lot of the analysis coming out, and even before then, is that we are experiencing a period of class de-alignment, which is to say that the working class is no longer aligned with the Democratic Party or vice versa. I actually think that's a chicken and egg question. It's unclear to me which one came first, and I think it's an empirical question, which is to say there's going to need to be more research done on it. What I can say is when Bill Clinton sold out working people by signing NAFTA, that was probably a pretty fucking big deal, right? And it certainly was a big deal to folks in the upper Midwest, right? And places that we now consider the Rust Belt. I also think, as far as the left goes, I think it's really important to acknowledge that we don't have, we've seen a waxing, or a waning rather, of durable institutions that actually represent working class politics. And by that I just mean the union movement and unionized folks have been on a precipitous decline. Obviously there have been attacks on labor since 1935, or actually before then, right? Like obviously the robber barons, they liked to actually murder people that were fighting for their rights, right? We've known that about the labor wars in the early or the late 19th century, and even before then, right? Because profit is king. However, in 1935, the Wagner Act passes, we actually have the right to collectively bargain and organize, and yay! And then the war happens, and then Taft-Hartley passes in 1947. So high gloss on labor law, but what ends up happening, I think, with the crisis in 1973 and the neoliberal period, is that we do see a concentrated attack by capital on working people, and specifically the institutions where they exercise power and can challenge the balance of forces, which is to say, can actually demand that capital give us our fair share, right? And so we've seen this long array of an attack, and it's been coordinated and organized, and we've splintered because of it. They weaponized identity politics to divide us into smaller and smaller camps, rather than helping us or preventing us from seeing that we are actually united and share common cause with one another. I also think, I mean, let's be honest, I'm going to be really critical here. I have been a member of DSA. I was a delegate to the 2017 convention where we were Bernie or bust. I was proudly on that side and we won. And then DSA fucked us. Or at least DSA fucked people like me who were really against backing any other candidate but Bernie. I think that's a mistake. I think we can talk about, what this precipitates is, again, with the election, this re-election of Trump, is whether or not we can do the dirty break, clean break scenario, which maybe some of you are familiar with. Dirty break, clean break. Clean break is we establish our own party, which is to say we working people, not DSA, obviously, but, like a girl can dream. Dirty break is that you use the weapons that are already at hand, which is to say the structure of the Democratic Party, you build within it, and then you break off once you seize that apparatus. I think that is on the table again, right? But we need to really fucking figure it out. And I just want to say, and one last thing about DSA and maybe organizations like this. We currently, in my opinion, do not represent working class people because members of our organizations are not working class people. So, and let's be honest about it, we're doing this, we're at UW-Madison, the vast majority of people, like if we were to do an actual query of the membership within some of our orgs, they're actually not the very people that we need to bring on board. We might be, I'm going to be qualified or classified as a member of the intelligentsia or like some sort of organic intellectual, but because of my educational status, I am technically not, according to some, a working class person. Right? And so if we're really trying to, we need to expand our organizations. We need to build them beyond these cloistered halls and actually engage folks that are doing, that are in fact really, really struggling. And I think that we have to be really honest about the kinds of people we appeal to and how we stay within our own silos to think about how we build connections and power together. And for me, I think that is most effective through labor organizing, because labor organizing is a space where you meet, you might have different ideological positions because you come from different milieus, different backgrounds, but you all have a common, I'm gonna call him an enemy, the boss. The boss is our enemy or our antagonist. We can all agree on that. I don't give a shit what you do outside of work, Like, let's concentrate on first fights, and then we can get to these larger projects, but it is through organizing in the workplace that I think that we can get the training and the practice to then build outside of those places. So, thanks.
All right. Does anybody want to follow that?
No, I don't. I will say that I think that people are tired, right? Of the amount of people that didn't even vote and the amount of people that went in the booth reluctantly voting for the Democratic Party because that's just the best that we could do at this point. But people are tired of that. I'm a part of several national movement organizations, and the amount of time, energy, and effort we spent to get Biden elected, even if the message was fuck Trump, which really was what it was. We didn't say Biden per se, but we ain't doing that again. We're not spending our time, money, resources, being on doors for hundreds of hours. I spent a week, 8 hours a day door knocking in 2020. I'm like, I'm not doing that for the Democratic Party. I don't give a shit about me and my people, right? So I think people are tired of the lesser of two evils. They're tired of voting somebody in who don't give a shit about working class people, black people, women, right? We talk about abortion, like, didn't that happen under Biden? So people are tired of, and the Democratic Party didn't even try. We're also tired of being taken, our votes and our identities being taken for granted, and you have to actually earn our vote. You actually have to put in the work, and they did not do that. And they haven't done it, I mean, in my opinion, since the beginning of time. But I'm talking from the perspective of my mom, my grandma, my auntie, right? Even they reluctantly went in the booth and checked off her name, but they weren't really feeling it. So I think now is the time for third party organizing. It really is, right? And we feel like we keep every 4 years we keep sacrificing organizing around third party movements because we don't want Trump, we don't want a Republican, we don't want a fascist, we don't want a corporate Democrat, right? We don't want a rapist, whatever. So, but where did that get us in 2020 for real? Right? If we would have put that, and many folks inside our movement spaces were saying this and we got shut down, but if we would have put that much energy into Bernie, even Elizabeth, right, where would we be right now? But we were like, no, we gotta sacrifice this. We gotta sacrifice this. And we are on the wrong side of history yet again. So I think we don't want to do that anymore. And I really encourage DSA, I really encourage our movement organizations to not make that sacrifice again, because it's gonna be the same thing in 2024. What year will it be? 2028? We're tired of that, right? If not now, when? If we do not put our energy into third-party organizing now, then it will never happen. So that has to be our biggest lesson learned from 2020 and 2024.
Right. Any other responses before we move to the next question? I think we're kind of moving there already.
I'll try to
Yeah.
tackle some of this. So, I think we absolutely have to focus on labor, and we have to focus on existing in democratic organization and in some extent. That one for me is DSA, and then I've got my own union. I do labor organizing for a living. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of challenges. Just real quick, I'd be interested in a show of hands from the crowd for folks who are in YDSA, DSA, or a labor union. Please raise your hands. Sweet. So that's most of the folks in this room. Madison is a metro of like 600,000 people. Something like that, some ballpark. Milwaukee is, I want to say, 1.5 million. We have to figure out how to organize some number of people in the tens of thousands locally, if not hundreds of thousands, to be able to take action with us in concerted ways. And the left hasn't gotten there yet. We I think had a fresh coat of paint in 2016, a fresh way of kind of engaging, and we're trying to build from that. And we haven't gotten to that point yet, right, of being able to win, obviously. Just thinking on some stuff though, I like DSA to me is I think by the numbers the largest home for trans folks in the country. It is effectively the political home for trans organizing in America, for non-binary folks, gender non-conforming. I started organizing when I was at Purdue, and that's a university in Indiana. Folks don't know, but I went a summer where I was co-chair of the chapter there, and I had money to get myself a handful of peanuts for food, like for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, a month, something like that. Time flies, like that it's a wake-up call that we don't have any sort of welfare social state that's going to be able to save people if they start to slip through the cracks. It was a wake-up call for myself in a lot of ways. And I think some of the blame that we can see is we had this sort of social welfare kind of state that existed in some more meaningful sense in the COVID years for a split second. And then just as soon, it was gone. And Harris didn't talk about that, Biden didn't talk about that. They made a strategic choice to let it quietly slip away, thinking that they didn't want to take a political loss when they didn't have the political power right to continue the welfare state. but they don't have the sense of organizing and direction that we have, the vision that we have. And so they failed to politicize people around that and make that a problem. And so when it's the economy stupid rolls around, they haven't set up their own defense for it, right? Of course, the Republicans can play the blame game. Of course, the fascists can point to how horrible the economy is. And so we have to be able to call stuff out at the local level. Just this week, it looks like we've won right to counsel for folks as a citywide initiative to protect renters and people facing foreclosures. That was an initiative that the local party was going to just let quietly slip away. We were told there's no way it was going to be saved. It took 54 emails, legitimately 54 emails was what woke them up that we're watching. There's a lot of stuff that we can win locally that takes this amount of organizing to win, right? And then there's a lot of stuff that's going to take this much, right? Like people were calling to defund the police at the same time, and we have to figure out how to win that. But 54 emails isn't going to make that happen, right? So I'm really curious about what this Bernie statement is going to be that he's kind of hinted at. If it's something about a third party, perhaps, if it's something about some other initiative. I think DSA is kind of acting like a proto-party at this point, and we are the people really pushing some sort of independent kind of initiative forward. Whether or not it's inside or outside the Democratic Party, we're acting like our own independent thing, and we're winning at a way higher rate than any other kind of national movement out there. And so my kind of call to folks, and we'll maybe get into like more what you can do, but the call to folks is to get into a political home, organize, make it democratic. Mine is DSA. I believe it's going to be DSA going forward, and then that has to unite with labor. And that's, if we don't do that, we lose.
Workers' Party? Now? Soon? I think we're kind of all of these questions are sort of getting at similar threads, so I'm just going to throw another one into the mix that I will say is, what can we expect from a Trump administration? I know a lot of what we've been talking about is, more general about how we got here, kind of trying to avoid treating Trump as this exceptional situation, and I don't want us to get into that sort of situation, but how the people around us in the ocean that we're swimming in are thinking about the Trump administration happening again, and they are ripe for the picking. So I want us to think about what we can expect from the Trump administration and how we can organize against it, both defensively in an anti-fascist way, but also offensively in thinking about the opportunities that might arise for us to start to build that political alternative. And I think we started talking about that, but I want to open it up if other people want to pick that up.
Go first. Can you guys hear me without the mic?
You do.
I have to lean so far over. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna start by trying to point some threads a little bit more from the last question, just talking about the election. I think it represents, just a total hollowing out of liberalism. That's not able to represent any coherent political project anymore. I think it's embarrassing for people to be stumping for a political party that that has a 8-year-old man with dementia, the White House for years, and they couldn't they didn't have enough party discipline or enough internal party discipline to be able to do anything about it. Now, that the election's over, a bunch of people talking big game about, oh my God, look, he did all these things, but we kept our mouths quiet the whole time. That's embarrassing. I think it shows that growth of the political left, or resurgence of the political left in the U.S. did come with the Bernie campaigns in 2016, 2020, and it was a big part of that was it wasn't about Trump, just about Trump. It was about having an oppositional pole, people realizing, hey, there is politics exists beyond whatever type of liberalism that the Democrats offer, and we saw some backsliding of that over the last 4 years because, part because of Bernie, although there's still a lot of unorganized left or plenty of other groups out there who were doing different things, but we saw backsliding because there wasn't that oppositional force anymore that disappeared from what was mainstream politics for most people, especially most people are still really politically disengaged across the spectrum, because of all the problems in their day-to-day lives, and understandably seeing politics and be okay, this doesn't offer us any answers. So I think to bring it over to the next question, we should be thinking about, hey, being more, as a left, being more directly oppositional, including to people standing in our ways, which is like Democratic Party establishment, Democratic Party leadership, and not trying to play the same game of, okay, like asking them for crumbs or trying to reform the party from within, although there's still some opportunities like using it as a platform to reach more people. Like, should be putting it out straightforwardly, like we shouldn't be buying into the, oh look, Trump is this unique political evil. I mean, he represents forces that, like rising fascism, that is different from what we've, the kind of conservative politics that we've had in the country in the previous few decades. But he is still part of the same capitalist system, which is why after all that song and dance, all the establishment Dems like, yeah, let's go, we're doing this transition now, it's cool, like he's normal, he's not, we're not acting like he's the unique evil fascist that we were claiming he is, and like defending or really trying to put our efforts through that party where people see them like, okay, like they are clearly do not believe in what, that he's a fascist acting like that is a dead end for us, where we're not putting forward our own political vision and, you know, our own like having a consistent political vision that people look at us as left orgs or left movements and be like, okay, like they are not lying to us, like this is not the same kind of politics we're seeing elsewhere. So I think we should be thinking about, you know, not bringing in like the same incremental framing. We should be looking at the history of left movements, like what has worked or like what has brought the left forward. Thinking about, you know, politics is not about just about, oh, look, all these people hate immigration, we gotta modulate to the right, we gotta get more racist. It's about making what is impossible now possible. Showing people that the frontiers that exist beyond what they think is possible and organizing them towards that. Like recognizing now that, you know, this is class war, we've been losing for a long time. Should know who our allies are, which are each other working class people. And like there's gonna be, you know, definitely more losses coming. Like, so like there's a lot of shit coming under this administration. Like there are, I think they are a little more organized last time in some ways, even though some of this Project 2025 stuff has also been overhyped or by Democrats as part of their Say Nothing campaign. But I think we're gonna see things like, you know, real action against, further criminalization against homelessness, which has been a bipartisan project in cities for years, like seeing it even in Madison, like the clearing out of encampments, increased funding for police, like increased policing criminalization of this, and it's another method to you know, discipline us as workers, like look at and scare people from taking action or further separate us from one another. Like I think we need to be thinking about that. You know, no more of the liberal #resistance bullshit this time. I think that is one opportunity we have. We did in 2016 with the more organized left. Like we should be leading with socialism as the alternative, leading with that as what does defeat fascism and defeats capitalism as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, like from a really specific, like logistical point, yeah, we're gonna see a lot more repression of organizing. And we saw it in different ways last time around, but it's probably going to, as Aditya mentioned, be probably a little bit more organized. You know, Trump was promised to kind of gut the NLRB or repeal the NLRA, so that is gonna specifically make union organizing a lot harder. But that doesn't necessarily mean all labor organizing can be harder. You just have to be a little creative about it. Yeah, cops are gonna be more empowered to do really shitty things with impunity. Not that they aren't already super empowered to do that. And then there's going to be a lot more like backlash against our like non-white comrades and organizers, and it will probably be a lot more permissible in a more blatant way. That means we have to go into everything we do with a level of clarity of politic, of our purpose, of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and make sure we are organizing in ways that create space and safety for our comrades and one another, create levels of protection for one another, in ways that, you know, as I said, there's much more likely to be a lot more backlash, a lot more violent repression, but also like structural repression. People are gonna get fired from their jobs for doing some of this organizing. People, and it'll be a lot more permissible. Also kind of piggybacking off of what Aditya said with the like resistance libs, oh man, I can't do another 4 years of that. But
Dick Cheney's part of the resistance now.
Dick Cheney's one of us. Oh, but so like in addition to like countering narratives from the right, there is also like the neoliberal desire for like symbolic action and kind of cathartic action that maybe doesn't have any real strategic purpose, but boy, does it get a lot of people wearing the same hat. And I think we need to be careful to avoid that. Cathartic action is good. I do fully believe that like there's a time and a place for us to like get together and scream in the streets.
Yes, tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the
Tomorrow at 2 p.m.
3 p.m. 2 p.m. is the art build.
Whatever time it is. Show up at 2, who knows? Be early to an action. You never know. You know, that is really important, but we cannot only do cathartic things without doing that like takes away our energy to do strategic things. You know, earlier I mentioned like my theory of change. You have to have a real clear idea of how do we actually achieve the future we're trying to achieve, and that seems like a really obvious question, but it trips up a lot of people, and that's how we get stuck in some of these like questions of like the dirty break versus the clean break from the Democrats. It's like how do we actually see us implementing socialism in America? Because your answer to that should also inform everything you do, right? But yeah, so I think I'll pass for now. I said some stuff.
We haven't heard from Tommy in a minute.
Yeah, just listening. I mean, I think to the first question, like how we got here, I think a couple people have touched on it. I mean, this is not unique to America. We're not alone in this. It is a global trend, a movement towards fascism, right? And I think because capitalism is a global system, it makes sense. I think that politics would move towards the right as capitalism continues to fail and people get more and more disillusioned. I think where the left needs to go from here, specifically from the student movement, is building power, right? Like clearly the Democratic Party is not going to, I think, in any way represent the working class. I mean, we see like even now, Nancy Pelosi coming out and being like, you know, the failure was not the Democrats at all. The failure was just, you know, people just didn't show up. Blaming voters, basically. It's like, there's not gonna be this mea culpa from the Democrats, like this like looking internally. So I think what we need to do, and I think especially as undergrads, is rank and file strategy. I think there are strategic sectors where young people, we can be pushing people into the 3 sectors that are very strategic, and we can build working class power by getting people to take careers in these sectors and actually pushing for change.
What sectors are those, Tommy?
I don't know, I was really hoping you would know.
I mean, I think there's, just because I know what Tommy's talking about, I don't even remember what like the big 3 are, but I do know that there's a lot of places where you can be really strategic. I think logistics, I think Amazon, I think UPS, I think the post office, those kinds of jobs that are either union or unionizing can be great places to get involved, build more democratic unions. Also nursing, teaching, lots of opportunity to join a union that exists or start a new one, but especially in unions that do exist, make sure that we have good radicals in there, making them more militant and more democratic so that they can fight for the things we need. Thank you. Okay, Tommy, you were done, right?
Yes, also we have 2-minute time limits, right? Just wonder what I'm gonna
We're just kind of winging it. All right. Oh, go ahead.
I'm good if you
Yeah.
don't-
No, go ahead.
In terms of what to expect, just these little fascist sleeper agents have been low key for a minute, but I think they're gonna feel more emboldened. And I think especially as women, queer people, black people, like I think radical self-defense is gonna be really important. And sometimes we're scared to say that out loud because of what the consequences are, right? For people who are really keen on defending their bodies and defending their communities, but we're gonna have to get comfortable with that, right? And make them scared again, or make them scared for the first time. That if you say something to me, I'm gonna slap the shit out of you. Seriously, right? And then I can't emphasize enough the importance of local wins, because we might have they might have their little trifecta going, but the local wins are gonna be so important, because we want police-free schools under Trump in Madison, right? That is important that we step on those local wins as much as possible in this time.
And we're gonna win free school meals in Madison under Trump. We can talk about that and then go. Another Adrian?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'll just add, I think that we need, like, from a very practical perspective, what we need to expect is that we're going to be responding in a somewhat reactive sort of way. This is how the administration is going to function. Again, because we don't really have all that many durable institutions, I do expect that we're going to react, or at least I hope we do here in Madison, to potential deportations of members of our community. I think that we're going to have to look for that, and we will react to it because we don't know when it's coming. So reactive versus proactive, right? But I think that rather than spending all of our time thinking about how we're going to have to react to all of these really heinous actions, I also think, and this is going to be hard, right? But we are also going to have to think proactively about how we build institutions, how we build community, as my fellow panelists have been talking about, how we make connections that are durable, how we show up for each other. I think that's actually much harder. It sounds pretty easy, but I think that, they want us to run ragged. They want to keep us off balance, I think. And so what we need to do is actually think forward and fight forward, think strategically about, I think it's important to think about what are feasible wins. I want a Labor Party as much as everybody else in this room, I hope. But are we gonna pull that off in 4 years? I hate to break it to you. We have had quite some time trying to make this happen, and it hasn't. That doesn't mean it's not worthwhile actually talking about it and putting resources into it, which is, I think, something that we've never done, or we haven't done it in a really feasible way, at least since Deb's tried to run independent as a labor activist. But I think that it's, again, worth the conversation, and we have to do those things together.
All right. I think you're ready for the thing I'm about to say, which is we are going to go into a section of questions and answers and comments from all of you. You may have thought this panel was going to end at 6. You may be surprised to learn at 6:06 p.m. that it is not. We're going to go until about 6:30. I'm going to give us about 20 minutes for questions, and then we're going to end with closing remarks from our panelists. I had asked you guys to think about some next steps for people wanting to plug into organizing here in Madison. Maybe you can incorporate that into your statements and or your answers to these questions. So I'm seeing some hands. I'm gonna hand you a mic.
Alright, so I think like the most important thing about winning future elections in America is that I voted Democratic, obviously, right? I'm pretty faithful, but and I was very disappointed, just like you guys, when Bernie didn't get the nomination last time. What I see the Democrats doing most wrong is they are not reaching out to like men especially. Like when people the Democrats haven't really marketed themselves as the party of diversity, and that's good. But at the same time, they're not really marketing themselves as a party that is going to also take care of men. And a lot of men are siding with the fascists because, of course, what they're just doing is protecting their own interests, which is to say, if they have male supremacy, white supremacy, nationalism, that means that America gets to dominate the rest of the world. And if they're not going to give up that, you need to say, like, we have a better vision for the future, right? Than that. And I think that the better vision for the future, of course, is everyone globally working together to create a better world for everybody, right? It's a much less hostile world, right? And so I think that as far as issues that I wish were pushed more, I just want to say I wish that we would push for things like public housing, ending homelessness, like just starting up more public things, and also really just remember that, you know, like Project 2025 isn't the only game in the table. Agenda 2030 was pushed by the UN, which is a much better vision for the future. And I think that if we work on doing things like strengthening ourselves as a global community, that's going to be a much more stronger, long-term, durable thing than just trying to invest in the same old nationalistic identities that we have, you know? Right now things are very nationalist and military oriented, and obviously we need to move away from that. So that's, I don't know if it's really a question, but that's my comment.
I think we also have to consider like how blackness played a role in that, because the Democratic Party did target black men in a very negative way. They shitted on them for like 100 days, and then the last week they talking about we got some problematic ass platform, right? So they absolutely took them for granted. Not only took them for granted, but it had the opposite effect of talking shit about how terrible they were for however many months, and then expected them to turn out to vote. So I think that is really, that's where that 20% came from, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if I could, absolutely second all of that. I think there's also, and we saw in this election, like in districts where, say, moderate Dems were running, they performed about the same level or even underperformed Harris. In districts where, like, AOC or Rashida Tlaib especially were running, were kind of like more progressive Democrats, not even necessarily socialist, right, but more progressive, they won a higher vote share than Harris, and like by margins and margins and margins. And that kind of, to some extent, indicates there's likely voters who voted for Rashida Tlaib and Trump. And she, right, is running on much more of universal vision of say, like public housing kind of style messaging, right? And also getting to add in like the prescriptive or descriptive kind of like very specific universal housing, and also there's a very hyper-specific issue that we have to take care of. And the policy, you know, is robust enough that it incorporates all of that. If I'm kind of making sense. And then more on kind of like the general gender dynamics. This was another thing that Tommy and I were talking about. And yeah, there absolutely has to be a positive vision that I can't say it has been like lacking, right? But like it's not there in the same way that Trumpists get to view the crumbling world around them and that there's no consequences to their action, and so might as well do irreparable harm to the people around them because they can, and they can get away with it, and it benefits them. And I think we have to, like, just a classic, we have to have joy in our movement, right? We have to show to other people that we're doing this, we're having fun. It's a slog, but we're also, you know, we're showing a vision of what it can mean to be a dude who's also like caring about his family in the ways that a socialist would care about their family.
Can I?
Yeah.
I think we've also talked a lot about building community, and I think like a big issue with masculinity, not that I can completely diagnose it, but is that I think men feel uncertain about their fact that their economic circumstances are very much not good. And especially Gen Z men, I think Gen Z in general, are looking at a future that is very bleak and looking for an answer. And I think Trump provided that. And I think to some degree this conversation has to be internal with men, because I think that men are lashing out at women, and I don't think it's fair to like ask. To bring that into this conversation at that moment, I think men should be figuring this out themselves a little bit.
I'm not trying to blame women. I'm just saying that like we need to recognize that like 70% of the voter is in America. Just like dealing with those economic issues, I think we'll do it. I think like spreading the blame around is not helpful. Let the Republicans be negative.
Cool. I just want to quickly respond and say, I don't think, so I think part of the conversation about gender and about the perception of certain segments of the male population that feel that they have been ignored or denigrated is because of supremacy, right? And so as a socialist and as a feminist, I believe that we do have to have these conversations. We have to meet people where they are. And part of that is saying, okay, I understand why this feels so uncomfortable, because for a time, there was an expectation and a world that was built upon a notion that there was a male breadwinner. And again, only for certain segments of the population, right? Like non-white folks were fully engaged in the labor market because they had to be, not because they were earning. There was a male breadwinner in a non-white household that was able to afford his wife or partner, like the June Cleaver experience. Like, get the fuck out of here. No, it was by necessity, right? And so we do have to unpack these kinds of tropes or these traditions and actually talk about them for what they are. And actually demonstrate what sort of disservice they do to both men and women, and the non-binary folks, right? Like, masculinity is damaging to men and women, honestly. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about, or a certain kind of masculinity, right? And there's nothing wrong with being masculine, there's nothing wrong with being feminine, but let's actually have a conversation about what those terms are doing.
All right, I'm seeing lots of hands go up. Okay, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have about 10 minutes. I'm gonna take 3, stop. Okay, sorry, I'm kidding. I'm gonna take 3 questions, and then we're gonna do rapid fire responses, and then I'm gonna take 3 more, and then we're gonna do rapid fire responses. Sound good? I'm going to you first.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to hit on what Adrian hit on of so DSA is really not working class. I just want to ask you guys, why do you think that is? Why is DSA seen as, and legitimately is, kind of like academic elitist? Why is the membership of DSA not working class, and what can you do about that?
Sorry, I just had the quickest comment to make that I think is maybe gonna help some of you guys not feel so doom and gloom about the election, but I work with 7th graders, and we just had to do this little election workbook for our election unit that we wrapped up on Thursday. And for the last lesson, we were crunching the numbers, and in 2016 and 2020, more Americans identified as independent than identified as Democrat or Republican. There really is a rising tide here, and a group of people that can be reached. People are sick of our 2-party system, and that trend is only growing. So this is not a movement that just erupted this year or the year before. It's been ongoing. The numbers have been going up since 2008. So keep that in mind when you're organizing.
All right, I'm gonna do one. Well, we'll see.
I'm gonna try to hurry up, but I'm the only Black person in here that got to speak. So I'm not gonna rush, so sorry. I wanted to quickly say I appreciate the panel. My name is Mike, pronouns anything said respectfully. I'm a community organizer alongside Bianca at Freedom Inc. She's my political leader and my love leader, my wife. And I'm a PhD student here at UW-Madison. But I wanted to quickly say that One day we have to just admit that America needs to be undone. And that blackness is always at the expense when we keep trying these projects of hope. I don't have time to explain that in depth, but we have to think about the dangers of hope and these cyclical things that we keep trying. These are not new. And this is no disrespect to you. I'm just saying none of the responses are new responses. We talked about the 60s and 70s. That's what it sounds like. But it sounds like the 1920s and the 1800s and the 1700s and the 1600s. So what the hell? Why do we keep doing this shit? I don't know. Okay. But anyway, hearing you all talk remind me of Joy James's work. She talks about this notion of the captive maternal, this radical work of care that directly engages deviance and fugitivity and the spirit of endurance against the state. So my question is, to your point, I'm so sorry I forgot your name. No, not you.
Allie.
Yeah, Allie. You talked about, let's be real, some of this shit is irredeemable, I would argue, at all. Because this society is not antagonistic to blackness, the world is, the human. When the human was being conceptualized, it was against the black. Black is not dehumanized, it's anti-human. So it calls into question civil society in general, not like what Sylvia Winter says. It's not the isms, racism, classism, sexism, etc. It's gender that's antagonistic to blackness. It's race first. Racism as the kind of giving birth to race, or gender giving birth, right? And anyway, so this is my real question, I guess. If this shit is irredeemable, thinking about Fred Moten and just like a long ass history of underground work, how do you balance, in terms of capacity, just above ground work? Because I'm not saying disengage the shit. I don't believe in shit like small wins. I just call them structural adjustments because they're always violent. There's no small win under a violent structure that's not violent to people, period. So how do you balance capacity like with above ground work and this necessary underground work? Because in the captive maternal, Joy James talks about how our work of survival always reinforces oppression. So we eventually need to get to like this guerrilla organizing. Example, like homies who broke Assad and Shakur out of prison. That's just low level shit. So how do we, one, move there, I guess, and then two, how do we balance it? Because it's gonna be a bunch of electoral politic motherfuckers, I get it. But it's gonna be motherfuckers like me who said that electoral politics, when you call on a better democracy, you call on a better slaveocracy. When you call on a better Democratic Party, it's at my expense. While you get to enjoy survival or resistance or a better time. Because when y'all sit up here making distinctions between fascism and what? What's the distinction between fascism and America? So be careful on those distinctions. They could be harmful. But anyway, my question is really around capacity. This above ground and underground work. I ain't saying expose your shit. I'm just saying, how might you think about that? Sorry for the long ass question.
Good, I'm gonna hand it back to our panelists.
I forgot what I was gonna say now. Mike threw me off, sorry, y'all. I should have known. But I also always appreciate that analysis but I really think our movements have become so professionalized and folks have been, like, I really think that was a strategy of corporate Democrats to de-radicalize our work. I know it sounds like a liberal, a revolutionary conspiracy, call it what you want, but we are not as radical as we were in 2016, and I've been doing this work since. We are not as radical as we were in the 80s and the 70s when we did not have money, right? And we have been trying to, we've been trying to have a healthy balance of, especially women like myself, Black women, not having to die poor. Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, like die poor as fuck. We're trying to have a balance where we can like live and have a living wage and pay our bills and take care of our children and take care of our families and community and ourselves and have health insurance. But it did something to us that we can't really name in this moment. I mean, the revolution will not be funded. It's probably like the best example I can go to right now. But I really think that like so much of our movement has become professionalized and not folks just living in the capital maternal being deviant, just out here doing whatever, pulling scraps together. Like there was something about that, the group of folks that were doing it without the money that made the work valuable and fulfilling, versus professionalizing a 9-to-5 director of organizing, right? It did something to us that we can't name, right? And maybe in 20 years, the Black Identity Extremist report will come out from the FBI, and they can talk about their little strategy and what they did to decentralize our movements and to de-radicalize our movements. But I really do think that has been, maybe not so much for DSA, but movement broadly. I think that is truly what's happening. We got money and we got swept up into that and meeting grant requirements, right? And not wanting to be too radical because it would jeopardize our funding. Like our funders don't even want us to say, we can't say abolitionist, we can't say defund, right? We can't say all these things. We can only say transformative justice and safety. Like no, we're trying to destroy and disrupt the state on corporate dollars. Like it just can't happen. It's impossible.
Yeah, I fully yes to everything Bianca just said. And also just, I guess, to the question of capacity and the irredeemability of these structures. Like, I'm the anarchist on the panel, so I'm gonna be like, yeah, let's fucking get rid of all of it, oh my God. Because it gets back to all of these questions of like, how far do we go when we're getting rid of these structures? And so we talk about like police abolition, but then, you know, we talk to kind of our socialist comrades who have this idea of like the perfect state, the perfect socialist state. But it's like, okay, so a state has to have borders. How are you enforcing those borders? And so thinking about those things and maybe challenging in these like bigger tent spaces, what our analysis of the future is. What are we trying to build? Getting back to my question of like, how do you want to build the future, but also what are you trying to build? And then the question of capacity towards these like big picture things, the above board stuff, the things we're supposed to do, the electoralism versus like on the ground in your community, organizing that, you know, the breaking people out of jail, the like feeding the unhoused, the making sure your neighbors are able to get to their medical appointments, the everyday things that are investing in your community. Personally, I'm not interested at all in electoralism, right? Which is why I thought it was a little funny that I was asking about this, but no, I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me be up here. And so that's where we have to have these broader questions on the left of like, okay, so where are we going? What are we trying to build? Let's make sure our capacity is going towards those things and not necessarily like playing in the sandbox that we've been told we have to work within. And playing their games, right? Because ultimately, like, America and American democracy are all at the service of capital and of capitalism. And so if we have correctly identified our enemy as like, you know, cis heteropatriarchal racial capitalism, what are we doing to build outside of that system? What are we doing to counter it in ways that don't draw our radical energy or distract our radical energy? And that's a big question, and that's something we should all be answering together, right? And figuring out, but also thank you so much for that question.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop in. Actually, I'll try to address some of your question from the very beginning, Charlie, about what is it, like movements like DSA or orgs like DSA not necessarily being representative of the working, definitely not being representative of the working class. I agree. I mean, there's a couple of reasons there. And one of them is that, of course, like with like colonized population in the U.S. or like really working class like, mass movements are bigger targets for oppression, like the anti-communist apparatus of the U.S. Like that has been much more immediately targeted, like snuff people out. Basically, like that's what happened with radical street organizers in Ferguson. Like mysteriously turned up dead over the years afterwards. Like I was in a lot of street actions here in Madison in 2020, and the people who got arrested were not the people talking about we should start a nonprofit, like we got to take money from the Boys and Girls Club, etc. Is the people who were talking about, hey, we should be taking action that disrupts the economy, like linking that to race. Those are the folks who got targeted. I think in the U.S. for a long time, like both like there's a lot of radical lineage that we were severed from for a long time, and the place where it survived were like these university academic institutions that are mostly draw from like upper class, they're quote unquote like petty bourgeois. We want to be a little bit more Marxist about it. I mean, some of that was like, yeah, there are people there who believe in those ideas, and some is like, yeah, they're academics who just studying that and like don't really believe it, but that's where that stayed alive. But I would say, you know, it is true, like historically, like the socialist ideas and stuff have always started. It's true that they've started in those like upper class circles, or even people like the Bolsheviks in Russia, like started off mostly with quote unquote people from the middle class, like Lenin was a lawyer in Cuba, like Che and Fidel both came from a lot of wealth. And yeah, like there are spaces where that can develop more, or where people have greater access to education, etc. It's true in communist parties like India, China, elsewhere. But what's important to know is that they don't stay that way. Like people do go and bring, deliberately work to bring in mass working class, you know, and not getting all, and don't get navel gazing about it either. Being like, oh, we're all white upper class people, we can't go talk to these other folks. Moving past that, and you know, yeah, recognizing that, but being deliberate about overcoming it.
Did someone say rank and file strategies?
We are coming up on 6:30, and I want to be respectful of our panelists' time. We've been a little fast and loose today, and I do recognize there are about 4 or 5 more hands. How are my panelists doing? Do you want to take another round of questions? I'm seeing some maybes. It's okay if the answer is no.
We should be respectful of the audience's time.
We should be respectful of the audience's time
love
too.
talking.
What's that for?
This is I'm ready.
You're ready?
I'm ready.
We're seeing some nods. Okay, fuck it, we ball. That's the spirit today, so I'm gonna do really fast. You had a really burning question.
Mike's question.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so Mike's, you know, your questions are hard to answer, and the reality is that people probably need to actually sit with that for a little bit, because people, I think some of the points that you make in your work are questions that people have never had to contend with before, just to be clear. So for me, since I know you, and you ask me those questions all the time, I really think, for me, what I think about is what is the most radical thing that I can do right now? What is the most radical thing with this decision that I have to make around the elections, with this choice I need to make around how I'm gonna provide services to this pregnant teenager, with this mother who doesn't have housing? What is the most radical thing I can do right now that will keep me out of jail? Because right in this moment, I ain't got the money to get bailed. Right, what is the most radical thing I can do right now with the capacity and energy that I have? And I think that's kept me grounded in that question around like, how do we balance this above ground, this while still being forced, because I'm not willingly engaging in any process. I feel like I'm being forced to engage in this process, right? So when I was teaching, what is the most radical thing I could do for this Black student who not showing up to school, right? I'm not about to, you know what I'm saying? Like that, I think that is the question, that is the answer that everybody should be living by on the day-to-day. And I also think that's helped me deprofessionalize my work. So if it's midnight and it's past 5 o'clock and a teenager is calling me because she ain't got no ride from State Street, I'm gonna pick up the phone and I'm gonna go pick her up. I think that is what keeps me grounded. Is it enough? No, right? Nothing outside of outright revolution is enough, but I think it keeps me grounded in being able to engage in this work in the day-to-day and not be satisfied with liberal wins and not be satisfied with the paycheck, not be satisfied with Kamala presidency, not be satisfied with a queer mayor, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, it keeps me grounded in knowing that we have to, these everyday acts are gonna make a difference in the long term, in our long-term strategy, and at least the ancestors will be proud, right? Even if we're not able to destroy America. So that's how I live, right? Trying to avenge the suffering of my ancestors. And I can't remember the full quote, but it's a Mary Hooks quote around how we transform society, how we transform ourselves, right? I think it's avenge the suffering of our ancestors, earn the respect of future generations, and be willing to be transformed in the service of the work.
But the thing is, are we really doing what the most radical thing we can do now? That's all I'm asking. And it's not, how do we do underground abortions or break people out of jail? I'm not talking about community.
Yeah, you're talking about illegal.
Yeah,
Right. No.
Yeah, like that's the balance I'm talking about. And I'm not telling anybody what to do, I'm just saying that's a necessary component for survival. But that's when we ignore, typically.
All right, I had a couple more hands. I'm gonna take those hands and then I'm gonna ask our panelists to take those questions or comments as they will and also give their final statements. Thank you everyone for your great questions and participation.
I guess this is tangentially related. As someone that's a massive nerd about socialist movements before us, because I think they've determined what we'll do in the future, we saw during the 1920s and the 1930s, this rise of the Socialist Party and the Communist Party, probably the strongest the left ever was during the 30s and 40s. And they failed. They got kneecapped and they went into hiding for a long time. And then the 60s and I guess early 70s, you had this rise of a more decentralized student-based left movement, especially the Weathermen who did individual acts of terror. This more like not so much building towards a party, but more of the direct action, the mass protests. And they failed. And then we had the neoliberal rise and we went into hiding up until Occupy Wall Street, and then finally with the Bernie campaign. So I guess as we're entering a third era, like this, the DSA basically being this third era of the rise of socialism and left politics, what can we do to avoid how those died, I guess?
There was some mention of the necessity of building a viable third party, also in the context of there's always been calls, especially in DSA, for building this workers' party. I feel like there have been some conceptions of this already with like PSL, Justice for All or whatever, with the current Cornel West thing, and we just see a multitude of these already existing, and so what does it mean to actually build a viable third party? Does that mean electoralism? Are we fighting, if we're rallying around Bernie, are we just fighting for progressive capitalism or actual socialism? There's also been talk on the panel about community and labor organizing and building working class institutions. I think that more concretely, if our goal is socialism, it requires some of those things, but also changing our relation to the means of production. How can any of these strategies help us actually achieve that?
All right. Thank you everyone for asking the biggest questions in the world. And thank you panelists for being willing to take them. And thank you all for being here today. This has been a long and exciting day and the first of hopefully many conversations of this kind, first of many people's org fairs. And so I'd like our panelists to take some of these last thoughts, bring us together and send us out on a note of what to do next.
Okay, these are big questions, and obviously, I am not in a position to answer them. What I would say is, again, I would say I identify as a Marxist, and so to me, these are very specific and highly historical, contextual questions. So, which is to say that you can't divorce them from the material history in which they occurred. And so is capital as a system of relationships extremely durable? Yeah. Do we have to keep fighting against it if we want to build the world that we want and transcend it? Yeah. We clearly haven't cracked that nut yet for a whole host of reasons, in part because capital is much easier to organize and be united than we are. And we still haven't figured out how to make that work. And I would say that actually there were moments in history where we did in fact see that work. The Russian Revolution was successful to a point, right? The Paris Commune was successful to a point. You didn't mention the Black Power movement, also a really important left movement, right? So I think that we have to learn how to, of course we have to learn how to fail better. But that doesn't mean that we stop, because if we stop, then that's, in my opinion, just apathy. So, and that's not how we build the world that we want. And then as far as third parties or electoralism and what have you, it seems to me that, our understanding of what a party is and how parties operate in the United States is vastly different than the way in which parties function in other countries and historically. And so I think that, what does it mean to be a member of a party, and what is a party to begin with? And we're getting kicked out of this room. But, we're fine. Pay no attention to the metaphor. We're good. Keep going. Yeah. No. So I think we're playing on a field. There are rules of the game here in the United States, and by that, or anywhere where we're going to face challenges as working people. The rules of the game here in the United States is that our system of government is set up to allow for two parties. The system of government, our Constitution, is designed specifically to make change difficult. Our system of government was set up on a whole host of assumptions about who were people and who possessed civic virtue to be able to make decisions on behalf of other people of Nepality, all sorts of things. But we've still made changes, and I still think that we should. It's just that we do need to recognize what the limitations are and see if we can. I think it really depends on whether or not we are willing to go beyond the bounds of, to Mike's point, about what is legal. And again, that's a really arbitrary question, right? Just because laws are meant to be broken. The divine, I keep seeing this this quote from Ursula Le Guin about how, for a long, long time, she said the divine right of kings was something that was just presumed to be the thing until it wasn't. So we're still hoping for something that is an alternative to capitalism, and I still think that we can get there. If I had the answer, if any of us had the answer, and I think Ali has already gotten to it, Bianca too, we actually have to, the whole point about developing this world that we want is that we actually get to all collectively participate in its determination and its fruition and its reproduction and what comes after that. And no one of us gets to say what that will look like or how that will come to be. And it's part and parcel of participating in that struggle that changes us, as with the beautiful quote that Bianca shared, and how that transforms us in the way in which we see the world, I hate to use a wonky term, but in a really dialectical process, whereby we are changed by the struggle, and in so doing, then we also change the way in which we see the world and how we are going to build it.
I can do everyone saw and be the person go right after Adrian this time. I definitely agree with Adrian. I think, you know, what we're seeing right now, like some of our tasks right now is like, we are in a very like world where most of us are very atomized, like most people haven't even existed in, or orgs or even any meaningful like community groups or anything like that outside of maybe folks who grew up in organized religion are still part of that. Like really like Autumn bringing up bowling alone earlier, like yeah, like a lot of our task right now is building up like tilling the soil, like seeding soil, building organization to get to the point where in moments of crises, like we are able to take more radical action, or like for those of us who are revolutionaries or communists like myself, yeah, like overthrow capitalism. I think like right now, you know, some of it means, yeah, like all the many groups that we have locally, yeah, how to coordinate and merge our efforts more, like also like work through that process of struggle and being transformed by that, and to that extent, you know, like democracy, so like democratic process and like the orgs that we're in, our democratic struggle is, it's not a moral good, but I think it's like an instrumental good. It's like what's the instrument through which we can struggle with each other, like build with one another, and build the kind of like larger orgs and mass movements needed to for the capitalism. Like we need, the goal is, you know, to merge many like social movements into a political instrument or organization capable of putting forward like an alternative program, you know, turning our 5 fingers into a fist, then turning that fist into a spear, finding the weak link in the systems that oppress us. Yeah, so I think that, you know, we, working class in the US, like doesn't, we deserve more, but we also need a hammer, like instrument to make that possible. I guess I'll just close by, I had some thoughts here on like, you know, the New Deal, which I think is what a lot of people in the US will think about as like the height of, oh, this is what leftism is, or this is what's possible. But it's important to think about it that the reforms, transformative reforms that we got didn't happen just because we had some good people get into office, did good things, and we all said yay from the sidelines. It arose in the context of radical organizing, like people, unemployment councils, like radical labor movements that existed for, or built up in the years and decades before it. Third parties with real sway, like Debs, those movements, and you know, the existence, whatever you think of it, of the Soviet Union posed a real threat to capitalism, like posed an alternative. And in that context, you know, we had liberals who pushed for basically New Deal because like there were far more radical alternatives, or even expanding the political imagination. And you know, New Deal was generally good, even though it was a compromise, and explicitly excluded Black people and created opportunities for more radical change that, you know, there was a moment where more radical things were possible. It didn't develop that way, but yeah, like I think the takeaway there is, you know, even if your politics are just like, oh, we need like that kind of social democracy, you know, don't need to totally change the system, no armed revolution or overthrow. The conditions that make that possible aren't a result of like, oh, we need to like get in Democratic Party, like push them over to the left, and then they'll do that. You need to build radical movements outside that structure, whether, you know, they are electoral in nature or not. I think we need both, and pull that left.
All right, we got about 4 minutes before the guy with the lanyard comes back. Let's make it snappy. Thank you. Let's go straight down the line for everyone who hasn't gone yet.
Okay, I'm gonna say something really briefly about the kind of like cyclical and iterative nature of organizing. I had the privilege of going to a couple different talks by Ruth Wilson Gilmore earlier this year, who's also a really rad person. I would highly recommend checking out her work. And she spoke a lot about how there are these kind of cycles of organizing, and we have to kind of keep doing the same organizing over and over and over again. But through that iteration, there is liberation, because we get to learn from each iteration. And so kind of to the point of your question in the past, like yes, there have been all sorts of things that have caused the downfall of other left movements. They've been actively worked against by capital and by the government, right? Like people were assassinated. So there's a degree to which there is that, but then there's also just the fact that every single time we we get a small step forward, we gain any ground, it's not like capital is going to just let us take that ground. They're going to come back at us from a different angle, and thusly we have to basically do that same fight over again. And also, like, that's the same what we have to do when we lose. Like, if we get knocked down, we have to just get the fuck back up. You can't just lay down in front of the gaping maw of capitalism and let it eat you. You have to get up again, and that is just kind of like the cyclical nature of what we're doing. That doesn't. I hope that sounds helpful. I find that particularly helpful because, like, in our organizing, we are rehearsing the world we wish to create, right? So we are. It is a rehearsal, though. So we get to do it again and again and again and do better every single time. And so yes, we learn from the past mistakes of, like, fragmenting, allowing OPSEC to get at us, you know, all of these different things. But also the very fact that yes, we might fail a little bit, or we might get knocked down a bit, is not necessarily like the end of it all. Kind of to the point where we've had these various cycles of left organizing in the past. They have a kneecap. They've been taken down in some way, shape, or form. But we came back, and we keep on coming back better, and trying to do it in a, you know, way that is more accessible to the working class, that is multiracial, that is, you know, has a lot more, you know, gender liberation and queer liberation embedded into it. But yeah, it is a cyclical thing, and it's an iterative thing, and we just have to keep going.
I like the famous lyrics, "Get knocked down, get back up again."
That's the cute book, too.
That's right. So the quick wrap up for me is that we have to just be completely not shy about bringing new people into organizing. Prove that your social relations are going to be leaps and bounds more effective at bringing more people in than a complete stranger. We've got to be talking to strangers too, right, and bringing them in. We don't win without that. There are a lot of strangers out there that we have to engage. But like, straight up ask your parents, you know, ask your siblings, ask your friends, ask, you know, whoever, your teacher. It doesn't matter. Anybody that you know that is feeling any level of despair right now, this is a moment for people to get reactivated, re-energized, and organized in some sense. I think there is, like, a mass base looking for answers. Democrats have dropped the bag in a way that I think everybody feels right now, right? It's just completely undeniable. Structurally, the Democratic Party has been incapable of stopping the rise of fascism coming back in America, right? And so, in a new era of organizing, how do we not fail? There's no guarantee of success. I wish there was, but take a little bit of hope in a kind of Marxist approach in that there's in my sense, a guarantee eventually of victory for socialism, as long as the earth doesn't burn first. And that, I think, is maybe our real constraint that we're facing up this time, that maybe gives a little extra sense of urgency and maybe forces us to play our hand to win, because you know, we're looking at climate crisis. It's coming around the corner. I mean, not even coming around the corner, it's happening. And we have to stop it before it gets horrifically bad. That's about what I got. Otherwise, experimentation on you know, third party kind of stuff. I think, as we talked about, the Democratic Party doesn't exist as the same party that, like, European parties exist as, whatever else. It's a lot more loosey-goosey. We can do whatever we want within them. We can call ourselves a party. We can act completely independent of them and run on the ballot line and just, you know, hijack the apparatus. We can do what we want. We just have to make sure we're winning and have a little bit of a scientific approach to that. Make sure we're looking at our results, looking at our wins, looking at our failures, what went wrong, what can we do better.
Thank you. I think moving forward, we need to be diametrically opposed to anything that doesn't serve us and not make concessions out of convenience, which I think we as a movement have done a lot of in the last 2 election cycles. I also think, for me, focusing on young people, like, how do I make young socialists? How do I turn a 5-year-old into a socialist? How do I turn their grandma, their aunties, their uncles into socialists in this moment, I think is really important. I agree with, you know, like, historically, I'm gonna just say this, like, socialist movements have not been popular with Black people in America, right? It's felt like, I don't know how many of y'all have read Native Son by Richard Wright, but like that's the example that comes to mind, where they're using, they're doing us a favor in order for us, in using us as a sacrifice to meet their needs at the end of the day, but there doesn't feel like a place for Black people in socialist movements. So I think, you know, I don't have the answers, but it's something to think about. I do think, you know, Working Families Party, you know, who I'm connected to, I think they're shifting that a little bit, but I think historically, Black people have not felt that they've had a place in these movements, or not seen how it would benefit them. So I think that needs to shift. Also, I think, focusing on young people and planting radical seeds is how I see my work over the next 80 years or however long I'm gonna be alive.
So to answer Eli Pierce's question, I have no idea. In closing, I just wanted to say, I think we were talking about like building young people up as socialists, and the encampment is kind of, I keep going back to it, but what we saw there was the most diverse working class movement, I think, of students, at least the UW-Milwaukee, right, that came together, and I think that they engaged in the struggle and actually were able to win what they wanted. And a lot of these people joined organizations after. I think that is something that we, like, if the left wants to make more socialists, we need to engage them in these mass movement struggles through campaigns, through one-on-one trainings, get them to become organizers and pull on their relationships.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. This panel was long.